Good afternoon and welcome to this briefing by the Jerusalem Press Club. I'm Estiari, Press Director. Our guest today is Lieutenant Colonel in Reserves Sarit Zehavi, founder and president of the Alma Research and Education Center and an expert on Hezbollah. Good afternoon, Lieutenant Colonel Zehavi, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
A pleasure. As always, it's been a very busy few days here, particularly on the northern front. I know that you have had sirens in your area as well today and in recent days. But I want to kind of get into some of the news that's been happening recently. Yesterday, a Hezbollah UAV hit a base deep in Israel, killing 4 and injuring scores more. In addition, Israel continues its operations in Lebanon against Hezbollah strongholds, even as Hezbollah continues to shell Israel, a shelling they began on October 8th, 2023, and have continued every day since. Yesterday, Israel urged the UN to remove UNIFIL forces from Hezbollah positions, while the UN has refused to do so. And today, Minister Gallant said coordination with UNIFIL on the ground is ongoing. So UNIFIL has a long history with Hezbollah and Israel. And I remember a few months ago seeing a picture, I believe perhaps that you showed me, of Hezbollah fighters near UNIFIL positions. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about the role of UNIFIL in recent years and in recent months.
Yes, of course. I think we should start with the mandate, like 1701, because this is the base for everything. And there is kind of a disagreement about what's the mandate. Israel is saying again and again and again that the mandate, UNIFIL should fulfill its mandate. What does that mean? UNIFIL should fulfill its mandate. I want to show you how it is phrased in Resolution 1701, because that's the basic for everything, and that's very important for everybody's understanding.
Okay.
So if I'm sharing with you the exact phrase, 1701 actually says that the area from the borderline to the Litani River will be empty of any illegal weapon except for the weapon of the Lebanese government and UNIFIL. This is what was supposed to happen, while today the reality is clear that in every home, almost every home, that in open areas, under every tree, IDF finds munitions of Hezbollah. So the biggest question was supposed to be, who is to monitor this resolution? And the problem in the resolution is that there is more than one answer. So if I'm looking at the resolution, I see 2 different articles. Article 11 says that UNIFIL should assist the Lebanese army establish this area of 25 kilometers from the border to the Litani River, while Article 12 says that UNIFIL should do everything within its capabilities to make sure that its area of operation is not used for any hostile activity, which, as you said, doesn't happen. So who is to fulfill the mandate? Who is to make sure that this area is not used for all these purposes by a terrorist organization? Is it UNIFIL or the Lebanese army? To my point of view, it doesn't really matter at this point, because none of them implemented the mandate. And from day one, Hezbollah deceived the whole world and continued in its terrorist activity, rebuilding its military deployment in South Lebanon. For me, this morning was a very frustrated morning, because I've been saying in the past 18 years, again and again and again, while I was in uniforms and since I ended my service, that this is exactly what is going to happen. We have 10,000 UNIFIL soldiers, that this was their mission. And today they insist to stay in South Lebanon under the statement that their mission is to give humanitarian aid. Well, for giving humanitarian aid, you don't need 10,000 UN soldiers that will risk their lives. It's enough to have like 1,000 of them. And it would be much easier for the IDF to fulfill its mission, which is exactly this mission today.
Yeah, so in light of everything that you said, I'm wondering, should the goal even be the implementation of UN Security Resolution 1701? Is that relevant from your perspective? Is that what should be happening right now? Is this still the goal of people, there's this lobby 1701, people have talked about getting Hezbollah behind the Litani, all of these issues. Based on what's happening right now and based on the role of UNIFIL until this point and perhaps in the future, what is what is the meaning of 1701?
So I want to show you a little bit of examples of how Hezbollah actually used UNIFIL as human shields. The video that you see here was published in Lebanon. It's not a secret or anything. It's a training of Hezbollah for kidnapping somebody, as you can see here. This training was 80 meters from the Israeli-Lebanese border. You see Hezbollah yellow flag now and a Palestinian flag. Next to a UN position. This is a UN position that you see here. A UN position, by the way, that is on top. I can see this UN position from the area that I live here in, 9 kilometers from Lebanon. This is very close to the Israeli-Lebanese border. And this is a Hezbollah position right below. Hezbollah planned in advance to use UNIFIL as human shields. If I'm trying to show you just another video, and I think that visuals are very important with showing what's going on here. IDF findings in South Lebanon are truly overwhelming. I was looking for the right word. Not surprising, but overwhelming. This is something that was published today, an underground infrastructure of Hezbollah, very, very close to UN position. Over there, also munition was found in the same area. This is an area that yesterday IDF soldiers were wounded, about 20 of them, from the fire of Hezbollah. So UNIFIL published this morning a tweet about the entry of IDF companies into Lebanon, but it failed to publish this. It failed to publish all of that, and it was clear that UNIFIL knew what's happening. Now, this video is very much connected to the issue of the resolution, because throughout the years, UNIFIL said that it is not entering the Shiite towns in South Lebanon because these are private territories. And by the resolution, it is not authorized to enter private territories. But the area that you see in this video is not private territory. This is open territory. There was no reason that UNIFIL will not enter to these places and find the tons of munitions that Hezbollah hid in the open territories. We at the Alma Center published a map of more than 20 sites that UNIFIL doesn't enter, and Hezbollah made them closed military zones and used them as closed military zones, open areas. There was no reason that UNIFIL will not enter there. So these are just few examples, and you can understand that I have many, many more from the past 18 years that UNIFIL was not fulfilling its mission by any way, not in open areas, not in private territories. Just nothing was happening around that. And that's very sad for me to see that today Hezbollah is using them as human shields. And we, in a chaotic situation of war, while we had to get into Lebanon to disarm Hezbollah, UNIFIL is disturbing us in doing that.
Yeah. So I want to ask you, based on what you've been saying now about UNIFIL and the experience that you have, is there a role then for UNIFIL at all in this region? Now I understand not at all, but in the future, perhaps.
The role should be very, very limited with a small force. There was an advantage, not in times of war, but in routine, there was an advantage to have a mediator between Israel and Lebanon, not on strategic issues. On the tactical issues on the ground, eventually it's a border that hosts civilians on both sides. And things happen, and you need somebody to mediate between the two sides. So in this respect, it's fine, but you don't need 10,000 soldiers to do that. UNIFIL can be used as a reporting force on what's going on. That's fine, even though, as you can see, his reports were not accurate as well. That's okay, but again, you don't need 10,000 soldiers for that. The only way to bring to an effective arrangement, when we speak of a diplomatic arrangement, once this effort of the IDF will come to its end or nearly to its end, we will have to talk of a force that will be willing to clash with Hezbollah. The mandate should be very, very clear. And it should be very, very clear that Hezbollah, on both branches, civilian and military, is not a legitimate entity anywhere, neither in Lebanon and nor elsewhere.
Following up on that, a reporter is asking whether you would say that the UN is using UNIFIL soldiers to protect Hezbollah.
I hope not. I truly hope not. And I want to tell you that throughout the years, I was very careful with blaming UNIFIL on any deliberate action against Israel. I always said that they are doing what they believe is their mission. And the mandate is truly limited, as you could see with the way they phrase, the mandate is phrased. But this morning, after I saw the statements coming out of UNIFIL in the past 48 hours, I was deeply disappointed because Israel and I myself, we warned again and again and again, and I am not part of the state of Israel. I am an independent, the end of an independent organization. But I did that, and the state of Israel had done that again and again and again, that Hezbollah will use UNIFIL as human shields. We warned again and again and again that Hezbollah is using South Lebanon as a weapon depot. Hezbollah planned an invasion. What does that mean that Hezbollah planned an invasion? It means that it has planted massive amount of munition in UNIFIL area of operation, ready to go. The bags were packed, ready to go, just below UNIFIL positions, ready to go to massacre us. I live 9 kilometers from the Israeli-Lebanese border. And now, instead of recording everything that the IDF finds, saying we want to come and document all these findings of the IDF, we are in a situation that UNIFIL refused to evacuate, following our request to evacuate to defend the lives of the soldiers of UNIFIL. This is extremely frustrating.
I want to talk a little bit about the weaponry that you've been discussing. I want to talk specifically about the UAV threat. We saw the damage that they are capable of, but I also want to zoom out for a second and just, there's been a lot of discussion about how much of the Hezbollah capabilities have been taken out. We've heard a lot of numbers thrown around in terms of how many of the missiles have been taken out, what is still operable, what's not. And I wonder if you can maybe talk a little bit about both UAV threat and what can or can't be done about that, and what that means about Hezbollah capabilities, but also the missile threat in general, and then maybe we'll come back to the tunnels.
Sure. I want to show you some statistics that we've been publishing since the war started. And what you can see here is the number of attacks of Hezbollah divided to the different types of weapons. And you can see that we had almost 560 attacks of UAVs since this war had started. This means that more than 1,000 UAVs, because it's more than one UAV in each attack, more than 1,000 UAVs were launched to Israel since this war started. This is a huge amount of UAVs. Some of them were for civilian purposes, and some of them were for attacking purposes. Eventually, after 11 Israelis were killed from these attacks, we had a catastrophic incident yesterday, that we had 4 casualties at the same incident, and almost 70 Israelis were wounded. But to intercept the UNVs, it's a new challenge for the IDF. We didn't face this with Gaza in all these operations and escalations that we had during the years with Gaza. So it's a new challenge for our aerial defense systems. And I want to say something about yesterday evening, since I witnessed that personally. I was standing on my balcony and I could see everything that was going on. IDF used everything it can to intercept UAVs and rockets that were launched pretty much at the same time to wide areas of northern Israel. Hezbollah deliberately used deception and succeeded eventually in crossing our aerial defense systems and crashed into the IDF base deep in Israel. This is a true threat, it's a true problem, but it doesn't mean that we didn't face it before. It's not a new threat during the war. It started from day one, since October 8th. It's a new threat. We didn't experience it before the war the way we experience it today. And there is no 100% success in interceptions and saving lives when we speak about the out of war.
Yes, we've gotten used to very amazing success rates for our air defenses. That is certainly true. But I do want to just touch back again about your assessment on how much of the Hezbollah capabilities have been downgraded or degraded completely since maybe we'll talk about the new offensive phrase of the IDF in Lebanon.
So if we take what our defense minister had said and try to calculate what he said with the numbers that we used to have before the war, we can say that Hezbollah still has about 50,000 mortars that are for very short ranges of about 10 kilometers. These mortars could be produced also in Lebanon, but the components are probably coming from outside. There are probably, if again we take what Galan had said at trying to calculate the numbers, about 25,000 Grads, Falak, Burkan, Fajr. These are all rockets to distances between mainly 40 kilometers, 30 kilometers, up to 80 kilometers. Burkan are for shorter ranges, but we put them in this arsenal, in this part. Some of them can be manufactured independently by Hezbollah in Lebanon. If we talk about the ranges of 80 to 200 kilometers, probably, again, it's all assessments. Hezbollah has about 2,000 rockets. We don't know how much was left from the long-range missiles. Hezbollah is dependent on the supply from outside of Lebanon. We don't know how much was left from the anti-tank missiles of Hezbollah. By the way, we never had the numbers of the anti-tanks of Hezbollah. Maybe a few thousand, maybe less. It depends on the external supply. And we don't know how many UAVs and PGMs, precision-guided missiles, have left. I want to say something about supply. Okay, yesterday it was published that Hezbollah, the IDF bombed an underground infrastructure of smuggling munition on the border between Lebanon and Syria. We analyzed the terrain, and this is one of these sites. I'm not sure that this is the site that was bombed, but this is one of these sites where we just analyzed the terrain, and we found the underground infrastructure, a tunnel of about 3 kilometers. And if we found one, there are probably more. And if the IDF bombed one, there are probably more. So we don't know how much is getting into Lebanon from Syria, manufactured in Syria or manufactured in Iran through the Lebanese-Syrian border. Well, this border is not sealed by any way, not underground and not above the ground. In most places, there is no fence there.
Yeah, the tunnels, there's been a lot of discussion, obviously, about tunnels in the south, in Gaza, and the threat that they certainly are and have been. And I know that there was also discussion about not only these smuggling tunnels bringing in weaponry, but also tunnels that have been discovered closer to the border with Israel. The concerns that the Radwan forces would be using that to attack in an October 7th style. In fact, and I wonder, we know that we've uncovered, and IDF has said they've destroyed a few of those, one or two, perhaps you have the number. Again, you're saying there's probably more where those were. Do you have additional information on that?
Look, there are 5 types of tunnels. The first one is the border crossing tunnels that the IDF published another one that was found this week, a very short one of a few tens of meters from the area. By the way, again, the western area, Zarit, very, very close to a watching tower of UNIFIL, very close to the position that you saw in my video. This is the tunnel that crossed below the ground into Israel, into a community named Zarit, very close to other tunnels that were found in the region in the previous operation of the IDF in 2019-2018. Then we have found 6 border crossing tunnels. I don't know if everybody saw the video from the tunnel back then. I can screen it and show it to you. These tunnels are an unbelievable project because they are excavated in the rock and not in the sand. You don't need cement. This tunnel was found in 2019, for example. It's a really impressive project. It's 1 kilometer long, and it's 80 meters deep. Other than that, there are what the IDF calls the tactical tunnels. As you saw, all these infrastructures underground that you see between the trees, and there also exist between the homes in South Lebanon. The idea was to create the infrastructure that will enable Hezbollah to launch its invasion plan, but at the same time also to enable Hezbollah to defend from an IDF invasion. Eventually, this is not happening. In most cases, as we learn today, Hezbollah is trying not to clash with the IDF soldiers, but to attack them from a distance with anti-tank missiles or mortars. The third type of tunnels is what we call strategic tunnels. I think it was a month or two ago that Hezbollah published a video under the title IMAD 4 of a strategic tunnel. We published a report of these strategic tunnels, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, that we found a route of a few tens of kilometers of tunnels. This is the video that Hezbollah published, what I'm showing now. So the video for us was a proof to what we published before. This strategic tunnel mission is to enable Hezbollah to transfer launchers and military operatives from one area in Lebanon to another, from the Beirut to the south, from the Lebanese-Syrian border, and from the Bekaa to the south, etc. As you can see, these are very wide tunnels, and the truck with the launcher can easily drive inside. We're talking about maybe hundreds of kilometers beneath the ground in Lebanon. And again, you can see they are excavated in the rocks, and they didn't need cement to cover them and to maintain them. We proved that there was an involvement of the Iranians and the North Koreans in this huge project. The fourth type is explosive tunnels. I don't have specific proofs, but we believe they exist there. The idea is to plant explosives in a tunnel that will be blocked. Nobody should drive in this tunnel or anything, and just to collapse it once somebody, IDF or whatever, is above, and collapse everything that there is above. And now I forgot what was my fifth type.
I'll ask you a quick question about these tunnels. In the meantime, you can think
in a minute I will remember, but let's move to the next question.
One of the things that we saw in Gaza, for example.
And border crossing. I said right. Border crossing, tactical, strategic, explosive, and approaching. Yeah. Approaching tunnels is what we now see again, that IDF finds again and again and again. Once you cannot cross the border with the tunnel, it stops right next to the border. And that way you also get the element of surprise, because when you pop out next to the border and then cross only with a meter or two, IDF we don't have time for alert. We will not see you with all these bushes and hills and valleys of South Lebanon. So this is the fifth type, and IDF is finding a lot of these in the past few days.
So just on this, and then I want to get to a number of questions here related to some of the things that we've discussed. In Gaza, we see a lot of the openings of these tunnels are in residential homes and in other civilian locations. Is that also the case in the north here that we're seeing?
Hezbollah was wise enough to use all the terrain, populated areas and open areas. In Gaza, you have much less open areas. But in Lebanon, you have towns which between them you have open areas. Hezbollah used all of that. So you have tunnel shafts in the homes, and Agari showed it. A video that you saw, a tunnel shaft below a bed of a child. And you have tunnel shafts below the forested areas as well. Both is being used for the purposes of Hezbollah military deployment.
I want to come back for a moment to UNIFIL. Being asked by a Spanish reporter specifically about the Spanish UNIFIL soldiers, that there's quite a few of them deployed in South Lebanon, and he's asking, how long do you imagine UNIFIL will continue to stay in the area?
I don't know. I wish they would go tomorrow or yesterday. I think they are risking their lives for nothing. I think this insistence on staying in South Lebanon is disturbing the IDF forces with disarming Hezbollah, which, as I've said, was supposed to be UNIFIL's mission. I don't know why they are insisting on that, but I hope they will come to their senses and withdraw as requested, only 5 kilometers. That's a fifth of their mandate, okay?
And relating back again to the UAV attack last night, one of the reporters here is wondering whether you can confirm the reports that Israeli civilians had actually called in information about the UAV before it hit, and that the Israeli police contacted the Air Force and tried to give information about that. If you know any more about information about that information.
I don't know any more from what was published, as you just read. I can tell you that everything happened very fast. It was a matter of around 10 to 15 minutes from the crossing to the crash, maybe 15 minutes. I don't know exactly if this is possible. And those who reported by the reports in Israel, as you read, they are not next to the border. So even if they reported, I am not sure that we had enough time to do something with this kind of report, because as far as I heard, they reported what they saw from Yokneam, which is not very far from the area of the crash.
Staying on the drones, another reporter is asking that reportedly Israel had turned down help from Ukraine, who apparently has more experience dealing with the drones in combating the drone threat. Obviously, I don't know if that's true or not, but according to the reports, this is what they are saying. And so looking at this, as we've discussed in the past, a new threat or perhaps a larger threat that we're seeing, how do we look at that? How do we deal with that? And why do you think that would be the case if they have the experience?
First of all, we are intercepting more than the Ukrainians with the percentage. Second, Ukraine is, I don't know how many more times bigger than Israel. So when the Ukrainians have much more time to deal with this threat than the Israelis, we have between seconds to minutes. And many of the drones that crashed, again, this one crashed like 60 kilometers from the border, but most of them crashed 6 meters or 60 meters from the border. So you hardly have time to do something. The terrain is very different. As I've said, it's hills and valleys. And I know that the IDF is working all the time to, like, I must say that I don't understand. IDF is doing the maximum it can to make sure that Israelis are safe. We are dealing with an enemy that is doing the maximum it can to kill Israelis. That's it.
Okay. I want to talk about the enemy that's trying to do the maximum that it can to kill Israelis, as you say. It seems that Hezbollah, according to all the reports, and certain, as well as some of the forces that have been taken out, were doing what they can to get ready to raid Israel, like an October 7th raid. One of the reporters who is asking why you think they haven't done so, or why they didn't do so before, perhaps this current round.
Okay, it's the $1 million question. We will probably never know the answer, but I can think of few explanations. First, there was no disagreement between Hezbollah and Hamas about the plan. Actually, Hamas copied the plan of Hezbollah step by step. We published a video that shows the plan that was published by Hezbollah a decade ago, and you see that it's step by step what Hamas had done, including the idea of taking hostages as human shields. Hezbollah published many threats of a multi-front campaign against Israel, of invasion from various fronts, including from Gaza, before the war and during the war, and the Iranians as well. So there was no disagreement upon the plan itself. Maybe there was a disagreement upon the date, maybe even the time, the hour. And maybe this was the reason why Hezbollah didn't join. Another option is that Hezbollah and Iran decided to enable Hamas to start and then join. And then when they saw that Hamas was very successful, they didn't want to be, Hezbollah would never be second after Hamas. Hezbollah wanted its own show. By the way, one of his speakers said that after everything that happened, he said, we don't want to be second after Hamas. Another reason is that very quickly the communities became empty. So why would they invade to empty communities? And very quickly IDF came up. So why would they invade and be less successful than Hamas and meet much more IDF forces? So this is in general.
Different issues. Okay, there's a number of questions coming in here. Some are going to go back to UNIFIL a little bit. And then I want to zoom out a little bit more about the Northern Front in general. One question that I'm receiving here, again, coming back to the resolution 1701, how do you see that being enforced? If the Lebanese army is not strong enough to do so and UNIFIL has shown itself incapable, what is the alternative apart from a permanent presence of the IDF, which the military and the political leadership say is not envisaged?
So as I've said, the starting point should be that Hezbollah is an illegitimate entity in Lebanon. It cannot, there is no option that this 1701 will be implemented while Hezbollah is a political party in the parliament and government of Lebanon. And it's a huge social movement in Lebanon that actually a state within a state has parallel infrastructures, civilian infrastructures to the government, providing a lot of services to the population and that way buying their support. So that's the starting point. This is what the starting point should be. Second, I agree. It cannot be the Lebanese army, and it cannot be UNIFIL. It should be a different kind of entity that may be a coalition. I don't know. There is a coalition for the Red Sea. There is a coalition to fight ISIS. Why isn't there a coalition to fight Hezbollah?
Good question. So I want to now zoom out very briefly to talk a little bit more broadly about the Northern Front and not so much about the technicalities of what's going on. And one of the things that we've seen is, obviously, we know that there are tens of thousands of Israeli civilians who, as you say, since October 8th, more or less, have been evacuated, internally displaced from their homes. Many of them, if not the vast majority of them, are supportive of current actions being taken by the IDF to try and restore safety and security to the north. And so the question is, first of all, how long do you think that support will last for these operations? How much patience will the home front have, particularly on the north, which is continuously, as you know better than all of us, being shelled? And what will it take for the northern residents to feel safe enough and secure enough to move back home?
First, I just want to raise your bet and say that it's 60,000 that are evacuated, but about 200,000 more that are under constant fire of Hezbollah, at least since June. And we had about 20% of the attacks between June and September that Hezbollah issued against Israel were to areas that are not evacuated, including to my hometown. Like only in my hometown, we had 3 homes that were destroyed in one day last week. So it's not just the evacuated areas that suffer from Hezbollah military capabilities. It's all of us here up north. That's a third of the Israeli residents. 200,000 in a distance of about 10 kilometers from the border, and much more than that, about 1.5 million if you include the areas of Haifa, etc. Children are not going to school since the ground operation had started, and also before the beginning of the war, when we were afraid from an invasion, children didn't go to school for 2 months. The patience of the Israelis is related to the successfulness of the IDF. As long as the IDF is finding munition, there is still work to do, Israelis are patient because we want to see the disarmament of Hezbollah. If it will become a situation like the security zone, that IDF became stagnatic and defensive rather than offensive, while all what we saw in the security zone back then is that IDF is inside its bases and not initiating the disarmament of Hezbollah. We don't want that. I am from the generation that my friends were killed in Lebanon. We don't want to go back to these times of the 90s. We truly don't want that. So any other solution is fine. I hope that within a few months, we will see a different reality in Lebanon in general and in South Lebanon in particular. But I think that it will be very difficult to gain a strategic achievement without international support. I think that it's outrageous that UNIFIL is not enabling us to do what it was supposed to do in the past 18 years. We need the international support, understanding that what we are doing is finally defending our citizens after, as you said, 11 months of a year of constant fire to Israel. And after Hezbollah, as you see by the findings of the IDF, this is not the Lebanese army, this is a terrorist organization. It shouldn't be this way.
And I want to talk a little bit about that terrorist organization and what you say could maybe be a change or not a change. And that is to talk about Iran, which of course is behind everything here. And so turning our attention to Iran and the fact that Iran has not only used its proxies in this past year, but has also directly attacked Israel twice with hundreds of missiles and projectiles. How worried is Iran about a possible Israeli retaliatory strike? Are they worried at all? Will there be, some kind of a strike? And what do you think is next on that front? How worried is Iran based on the fact that there's clearly some kind of Israeli infiltration to Hezbollah from an intelligence perspective, and that will have ramifications for Iran as well, perhaps. So what is, we zoom out a little bit on that.
I want to say a few notes about that. First, I think that as Westerns, we should ask ourselves tough questions about the Iranian attacks against Israel, because our basic assumption was that Iran doesn't want a war in Iran, and that's why it cultivated its proxy militias in the Middle East, so it will be able to fight Israel indirectly. And all of a sudden, we see Iran initiating a direct war with Israel. Okay, this is a declaration of war, launching hundreds of missiles to Israel. It's just we don't want to say it, but this is what it is in particular. So how come Iran is willing to take the risk? So if you ask me if Iran is worried, it's probably not worried enough, because if it was worried enough, it wouldn't launch all these missiles to Israel, right? That's one note. Second note, I think it's not helpful when the world is looking at this problem only from a defensive point of view, because defensive point of view is not going to stop the nuclear program of Iran. What Iran had done, as I've said, is a declaration of war. And if this is what it is, we should attack the nuclear facilities of Iran, because it's a global threat. I'm saying we, I don't mean the state of Israel. I mean the state of Israel, United States, Britain, everybody that is worried about Iran becoming nuclear. Because while we are having this conversation about Hezbollah here, there is a progress in the nuclear program of Iran. They don't stop. So when are we going to put an end to that with another agreement? They are a piece of art in taking negotiations to last forever. And they are the experts to doing so. And they are the experts in deceiving, as clearly what we see is happening now in Lebanon. And we should change our state of mind around it.
So on that state of mind, the stationing of the U.S. THAAD battery in Israel, is that part of that changing of station mind, or do you think that is?
No, it's still about defense. It's still about defense. I think it's great. I truly appreciate and grateful that there is a defense, that we are getting the help with regard to defense. But I think that with offense, we should do something together, because it doesn't threat, the nuclear facilities of Iran do not pose a threat just to the state of Israel. It's a global threat. This is how we should treat it.
I want to come back to defense for a second. There are a couple of journalists asking about the defense against drones and UAVs, and whether there are other technologies and what else can be done to protect Israel, civilians, and others from these threats.
I don't know. I'm not the right person to ask this, because what I see from my balcony, as I've said, is that the maximum is being done with the helicopters and jets and all the aerial defense systems with the various technologies. A lot of time and money and resources is being invested in this. For more details, you need to speak with somebody who is an expert to aerial defense systems. But again, bear in mind that it's a relatively new threat, and we are learning. It's a learning process of what works and what doesn't work.
Yeah, and we've seen also reports as well that that Israel is working on some kind of additional laser or some kind of defense against these. When that will be ready will be anyone's guess, I suppose, or perhaps anyone who's not in the intelligence community's guess. And another question coming in here about UNIFIL. I know we've discussed it. I just will want to go back for those who missed it earlier. Talking about 1701, and the question is the transformation of that mandate from what they're referring to as a peacekeeping to peace forcing mandate, and this was the case in the Korean War, where they used what they call an approaching tunnels as well. Is that the kind of approach you're looking for 1701, or that you would think?
This is a good example. The big question is whether if it will be defined as peace enforcement. Is UNIFIL understand the meaning of that? Because the meaning of that is that the UN is going to fight terror. That's the meaning of that. If the UN is willing to fight terror and stop playing games saying that they are dressed in civilian clothing, because what Hezbollah has done, and you saw it with what IDF published, that it finds the uniforms and the military shoes next to the border. Hezbollah planned to come on civilian clothing, to get dressed in all these hidden positions next to the border, and then to cross into Israel. So if we will stop playing these games of, everybody knows how Hezbollah military operatives looks like, even though they are wearing jeans, fine. But I've never seen a UN force that is willing to fight terror.
Yeah, I think this, okay, last question that's coming in here. Asking, why is the IDF asking residents to move north of the Awali and not the Litani?
Okay. Two things. First, to clarify for everybody, due to international law, collateral damage is legitimate under three conditions: that the target must be a military target. If there are rockets in the school, it's a military target. That the population must be warned, as long as it doesn't damage the operational effect. So the population is being warned to go north to the Awali. And the issue of proportionality, which here I'm not going to get to all these details. All I would say that we should stop counting proportionality about the amount of blood, because we are busy in defense of our people and Hezbollah is busy in putting their own people at risk. Now to your question. IDF ground operation is south to the Litani River, but the airstrikes of the IDF against the Hezbollah weapon warehouses is not only south to the Litani River, it's also north to the Litani River. It's also in the Dahia. It's also in the Bka. And in all these areas, IDF warned the population to evacuate, so it will be capable of taking off all these warehouses of munitions.
Okay, just one last question, which I don't know whether you are able to answer or not, which is, do you have a sense of, since the ground operations have begun already, how much damage has been done to Hezbollah?
So we just discussed that you're asking a damage from the ground.
Yeah, the whole.
Okay, overall, probably a meaningful damage as stated by the defense minister about the arsenal of the rockets. The pagers, the amount of Hezbollah military operatives that were killed is probably above 1,000. The amount of commanders is, wow, I can't remember the exact number, but it's about 80 commanders. The leadership that was killed, all of these are definitely achievements. With the ground operation, it's going meter by meter, disarming Hezbollah, and there are tons of findings more and more and more truly unbelievable amounts, or believable amounts of munitions of various types that are being found, and IDF now is only in the areas which are very close to the border. So probably there is much more when we speak about the ground forces of Hezbollah and the equipment that they left, the tunnels, and the short-range rockets, etc. What's
Okay.
going on?
We're gonna
Give me a minute because
that's
we have
okay.
tons of alerts now to Israel's north.
Yes, I see that now. We have alerts now in Aflit, Akko, Pardes Chana, and other areas as well. We are going to wrap here, Sarit, from your very, very in-depth briefing, which I really appreciate. Thank you for sharing your time. I know it's not easy these days, and I appreciate you coming on and sharing your expertise with us. And thank you very much, Ali Naor, for facilitating this briefing, my colleague at the JPC. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you at our next briefing, and have a good evening to all. A good and safe evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Pleasure.